Good evening, everybody. So tonight I come here this evening with a very simple premise, that each one of you, as community college students, are an answer to one of our biggest problems. And that is that we need to have all your voices be visible, and that we have to create a diverse and well-trained workforce in all our fields. Your voices are currently missing. And what can we do in order to be able to make sure that you are part of that narrative? So why you? Why community college students? Well, one is that here in California, we know that over 75% of our underrepresented students actually begin their college career in a community college. You actually are the most diverse population of higher education students in this state and in the country. And so we need to make sure that your voices are being heard. And so this is a challenge that I want each of you to consider, that you need to be part of that path and of that narrative. We need you in every field. And so what I said was a very simple premise isn't that simple anymore, right? And so I'd like to share a couple of stanzas of a poem. So it's going to be something else you're going to be hearing about tonight. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could. And to where it been in the undergrowth, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. And so first, I want to thank my English teacher from high school. I grew up in the city of Lawrence, where Robert Frost, who wrote that poem, came from and was born. And she every day tried to instill in us some creativity, some beauty, some writing, because she knew that our backgrounds didn't have a lot of beauty. They didn't have a lot of nice words to talk about what we were going through. But she wanted to make sure that we knew that language and that it was part of us. And those last two lines of the poem, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference, are lines that I come back to pretty regularly when I work with my community college students, and even when I'm thinking about what I'm about to do. I've taken the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And so when I ask you what image you think about when you hear those words or when you heard the first two stanzas of the poem, many of you were probably thinking a road like this, a beautiful, tranquil New England landscape in the fall with the roads diverging. Yet, for many of us, the reality of when we come to that divergent road is that the roads actually look a lot more like this. And so one of the things that we need to do is what happens when you come to that point where the roads are diverging? Are you paralyzed by the risk that you may want to take, or do you embrace that risk and move forward? And so tonight, every good journey starts with a choice and with that first step. So what I'd like to do with you this evening is make those choices and take those first steps with you. So where do you go, right? There's many places where you can be heading to. As you know, wouldn't it be great, with the technology that we currently have, that you take your phone out and you GPS, I want to be a doctor. You put doctor in your phone and all of a sudden, all the directions, how you get there, everything is laid out for you. But it's not that easy, right? So first, you have to be aware and accept that doctor is the destination that you actually want to walk towards and become. In 1994, I came to one of those crossroads, one of those diverging paths in my life. I was working in HIV/AIDS at the time, and I was working with a lot of amazing people, a lot of incredible people, both in my home state of Massachusetts, but also nationally and internationally. And at the same time, I was also watching, unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends, a lot of my neighbors die from this horrible epidemic that was really just bringing so many beautiful and wonderful people down. So I had to ask myself, what am I going to do in this path that's in front of me? Do I continue working on this really important field of HIV research, HIV prevention, or do I do something else? And for me, one of the questions, that was a very important question, because in that moment, I made the decision that there was another path, and where I could still be doing this really important work. And that was to work with young people, because I was also seeing that there were a lot of young people who were not making the best decisions, who were not educated, and who were dying. And I really wanted to make sure that they were part of our future and that their voices were part of our collective narrative. So what did I do? I did all this research, I read a lot about youth development, adolescent development, and really started to think about, okay, this is what I want to do. I had to commit to that, and I had to make that really part of me and embrace it as part of my life. And so I wrote down this. I actually wrote this in 1994. It's actually signed. And I still have this. And so these were all the ideas of all the research, and this became my personal philosophy on how I work and how I approach working with young people. And to this day, this philosophy is still part of who I am. What I believed then is still part of what I do today. And if I ever question some of the work that I'm doing on how I work with young people, I come back to this document, and to me it's still incredibly alive and relevant. You know, that youth empowerment and developing youth leadership is critical to the health and success of a society. Working for positive change and social justice in the context of community is critical. Education must be personalized and students must be active participants in their learning. And education should enable young people to do meaningful work and to participate as full members of society. All these elements to me are still very real and still very much part of my narrative. And so the other half of this work, beyond commitment, is that you have to be incredibly accepting of who you are. And this is the other part that also can be very difficult, right? It's like, who are you, right? You get that question asked so many times. What are you doing with your life? And so that by itself is its own journey. And that sense of self-acceptance is just as important as that moment where you have commitment to the work that you're doing. And so at this moment, I want to make sure to remind all of you that right now, as students, as young people, you're all perfect in this moment. And right here and right now, you can accept who you are. And you can move forward with whatever it is, the dream that you have of achieving. And so that cannot be denied. And so when I work with students, there's always, that tends to be the hardest work. I can work with you and put together your applications. I can help you with your personal statements. I can help you with your applications to medical school. I can help you with all that work, getting an internship. I can even help you with your resumes, right? And so that's another place where I'd just like to take a minute to stop with that word resumes. That's sort of that one document that all of you at some point have to write. And it's the one document that all of you at some point have to put in front of somebody else to showcase who you are. And what I've seen in so much of the work that I've been able to do with young people and with community college students is that that document to me demonstrates this lack of commitment and lack of self-awareness. Because what I see so many times is that you actually minimize who you are in that document and that you self-edit your accomplishments. And so you definitely, at this point, a piece of advice is that those are two behaviors that you need to change. Self-editing and also self-minimizing. You need to find the language that really embraces and describes everything that you are doing and are capable of doing and plan to accomplish, And you also need to find the people who will be working with you to find that language and challenging you as you move forward. So that's where we're stopping, right? I just had to do a little bit of construction with you, but definitely that this is the place that, as you're moving forward, that you really want to take the time to be thinking about who you are, how you accept who you are, what you are embraced, and what is the path that you're moving forward on. And hopefully that you're always feeling that this is the direction that you're moving in. And that there are always going to be some challenges, right? So there's all kinds of things that will always be in your way. And so you may be clear that you're moving in the northward direction, in the forward direction, but all these different things are happening as well. There's always going to be naysayers, there's going to be doubters, there's going to be people who are going to say, you're not capable of doing that. And so part of my message this evening is that, again, you're all greater than all of this. And that you're also going to face some of the other issues that we're facing as a society. Gender bias, racism, homophobia, and other forms of oppression that we're dealing with. And again, you are greater than all of these. And part of this is building a sense of who you are in self-efficacy and resilience. So I want to share a story with you. When I was working on my master's, I was living in Boston. I was working on my master's in public health. And so I was working 2 jobs, right? And then I would take the subway and then get on a bus. And then I would go to class. The bus would drop me off about 4 blocks away from class, and I would walk to class. So I would do this in the winter as well. And so most of you, if you're from Southern California, you have no idea what winter's like. This is winter. That's my campus in Boston, where I got my master's. And this could be 2, 3, almost 4 months of our lives. And so one night, I got off the bus. I was heading to my final. I had to walk over one of those snowbanks, get on the sidewalk, and walk to class. And so as I'm walking, literally, the sidewalk caves in underneath me, and I fall through the sidewalk. And so in that moment, you really, really question, what is going on? And what is the universe asking me to do? And why is it testing me this way? And so I looked, I said, I'm going to get up out of this hole. And one way or the other, I'm going to make it to that class. And I did. I walked into class. My pants were all ripped. I had blood dripping down one of my legs. I went up, got my test. Nobody said anything. It was just complete silence. And so took my test, finished, walked in, gave it back, and then got on the bus, got on the subway, and headed home. And in that class, by the way, I got an A. And so I share this story because to highlight 3 things. Well, actually 2 things, and then there's a third. 2 is so 2 is 3. Is that, this is sort of a story around this concept of self-efficacy. That one is that you always have to get up and master the challenges that are in front of you. And that you learn from your failures and your successes. That's sort of the research in social science of Albert Bandura. And then the second is that you find the people who can also help you succeed and move forward. And that is a critical part of that work. I did a lot of this work. I was able to do my master's because there were other people who believed in me. And when I was in that hole, I said, there are a lot of people who believe in me right now. But it's not just me. It's a lot of other people that are with me, my community and my family. And then the third part, which actually another social scientist, psychologist actually brought into the mix, James Maddox, is this idea of imaginal experiences. So just take 3 seconds, close your eyes, and think of those 2 words, imaginal experiences. And the idea behind that is pretty simple, is that you each have to also, as you're on your path, visualize where you're heading to. And that visualization process is actually incredibly critical, because that's how you create your own social identity. That's how you create that place that you're heading towards. And you make it real. And so those 3 elements are incredibly important when we're talking about self-efficacy. So you've done a lot of work, take a little, like 30 seconds to rest, but guess what? At this moment, you're probably starting to feel this way. I definitely have, right? And your body may start not feeling quite right. And so there are all these things going on. And this is where I just want to take a minute to really talk about mental health. Because this is really the place where when you're doing all the work, there can be lots of strenuous issues that are happening that can bring you down. Depression, anxiety, stress, and that you really need to address and talk to people about those issues so that you can succeed on your goals. It's something at community colleges, at all college campuses, that we all have to be looking at. Over at least 60% of students who need mental health services are not accessing them. And we know that at least 80% of the majority of mental health diagnoses actually happen before the age of 24. So you, as a group of young people, this is something that we have to talk about, and it's something we need to address, but we can do it together. And so that if you're ever in this space, to definitely go and find the help that you need, and talk to the people who can help you and work with you. So, one more poem. And so Langston Hughes wrote, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over it like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?" And so I shared this poem because this is another one I come back to quite a bit when I work with my students. Many times when I'm working with young people, I talk about this concept of my deferred dreamers. The young people who have all these dreams and aspirations of being the CEO, being the doctor, aspiring to be all these amazing jobs. Yet there are all these other people who have been telling them, no, you really can't do that. Why don't you think about something else? And so they put these dreams in a box. And so what I tell my students, and I'm telling you this evening, is that dream needs to live outside of the box. It needs to become visible, and you need to share that. And then the next question I get is, how? How can I do this? And where do I start? And so my last image here. I drive by this sign every morning on the way to work. And it's sort of like my talisman, right? It's like begin. I begin my day here with this sign. And so that's what I'm telling each of you to do. Begin. Begin taking care of yourselves. Begin creating your experiences. Begin developing your work. This is going to be a lot of difficult work, but each of you has more than just a simple poem inside of you. You each have an epic poem waiting to be written, read, and shared with the world. Go write it, live it, and change the world. Start, begin, and become visible. Thank you.